Okay, Elon Musk. The guy's a walking paradox, right? Building rockets, but tweeting memes, dating celebrities, but, sleeping on factory floors. You wanted answers, wanted to dig into Walter Isaacson's new bio, see if he cracked the code.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's trying to, right? It's like there's this fascination with figuring out his secret sauce. And don't get me wrong, there are tons of articles out there dissecting every move the guy makes.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we're trying to map the human genome, but for ambition, for genius.
Exactly, that Muskness, right.
Mm.
But the biography, it offers us something a bit different, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Like we're getting the uncut version, going deeper than the headlines ever could. And where Isaacson really surprised me was how far back he went into family history. Like really deep, especially on Elon's mom's side.
The Haldermans.
The Haldermans, yeah. Which I gotta say, at first I was like, okay, how relevant can this be? But let me tell you, it got interesting fast.
Oh, it always does, right? We talk about nature versus nurture, but rarely do we get such a clear view of both forces at play. And you see that right away with Elon's grandfather, Joshua Haldeman. This is a guy who embodies the phrase, living life on his own terms.
That might be an understatement. Okay, so born on the Canadian prairies, you'd expect a certain type, right? Salt of the earth, strong and silent, that kind of thing. But Joshua, not one for fences, literally and figuratively.
No kidding. The resume reads like an adventure novel.
We're talking cowboy, rodeo rider. The guy was even a stowaway on a ship at one point.
Just casually hops on a ship, no big deal.
Right. I get anxious just thinking about missing a flight. What drives someone to do that?
It's fascinating, isn't it? And Isaacson does a great job of putting it all into context. This is the Depression era. Opportunities scarce. After losing the family farm, Joshua, he seems determined to seize control of his own destiny, no matter how wild it gets.
And that bleeds into his politics, too, doesn't it? He becomes a staunch supporter of the Social Credit Party, which, for anyone who doesn't know, they were advocating for some, shall we say, unconventional economic ideas.
Unconventional is one way to put it.
They wanted to give everyone a guaranteed income.
Exactly. A precursor to what we now call universal basic income, which, and this is where it gets really interesting, Elon himself has spoken about.
Whoa. Talk about things coming full circle.
Right. Makes you wonder if those dinner table conversations about social structures, about wealth inequality, made their way into young Elon's mind somehow.
Planting seeds early. But it wasn't just the Social Credit Party, right? Joshua was also involved with the technocracy movement.
Ah, yes. The technocrats.
Now, for anyone scratching their heads, these were folks who believed that engineers, scientists, they should be calling the shots, not politicians.
Sounds familiar.
Right, like eerily familiar.
It's uncanny. Almost like you can draw a direct line from Joshua's fervent belief in technocracy to Elon's own vision.
Right.
Leveraging technology to solve the world's problems, whether it's sustainable energy or colonizing Mars.
It's like he inherited the blueprint for disrupting the status quo, just aimed it at a different target.
But this rebellious streak, this drive to challenge convention, it doesn't stop with Joshua. Enter Winifred, Elon's grandmother.
Winifred. Okay, so if Joshua was defying expectations on the prairies, Winifred was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Imagine this. A young woman in the 1930s running away from rural Canada to become a dancer in Chicago.
Just like that.
The sheer audacity of that move.
And she ends up meeting Joshua at her dance studio, of all places.
Of course. Where else?
He takes up ballroom dancing and, well, the rest is history.
It's almost too perfect, isn't it? Two strong personalities, both risk takers, both with this independent streak a mile wide. You can't help but wonder how that dynamic, that energy played out in their family. It's funny. We talk about inherited traits, right? Like eye color, height, that kind of thing. But what about risk appetite or that drive to break the mold?
That entrepreneurial spirit.
Exactly. Makes you wonder if Elon inherited that go big or go home gene from the Haldermans.
And it's not just the go big part, but the go home part that's interesting, right? That recurring theme of going against the grain, even if it means ruffling feathers. Within your own family, even. And that's where Elon's father, Errol Musk, enters the picture. A man who seems to embody both the ambition and the complexities of that Haldeman legacy.
Oh, absolutely. We've got Joshua as this adventurous risk taker, but Errol, he brings a whole other dimension. He's this brilliant engineer, a real go-getter, but also, let's be honest, a bit of a rogue.
A bit of a rogue, yeah.
And his own upbringing. It's like something out of a movie.
Tell me about it. His mother, Cora, escapes to South Africa during World War II, ends up meeting Walter Musk, a military cryptographer.
Cryptography. Okay, now that's just cool.
Right. Talk about intrigue. But then, after the war, Walter becomes reclusive. Imagine living with his former co-breaker who'd rather do crossword puzzles than talk about his wartime experiences.
No wonder Cora packs up and moves back to South Africa with the kids. You can almost see that independent streak, that refusal to be tied down, resurfacing another generation.
Absolutely. And Errol, he takes after his mother in that regard, becomes a successful engineer, but he's also restoring cars and planes on the side, dabbling in local politics even.
This guy never sits still, does he?
Not a chance.
Yeah.
And get this, he wins a seat on the Pretoria City Council, campaigns against a pro-apartheid candidate, no less.
Whoa, okay, stop right there. That detail just gave me chills. It's like this family can't help but challenge the status quo. Whether it's escaping war-torn Europe, running away to be a dancer, or, taking on the system in apartheid-era South Africa, it's in their blood.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if Elon inherited that same instinct to fight for what he believes in, even if it means going against the grain. But, and this is the thing with Errol, there's also this recklessness, this impulsivity.
Right. Two sides to every coin.
Exactly. And it can have a dark side.
Right, and this is where things take a bit of a turn. Isaacson doesn't shy away from the more, shall we say, tumultuous aspects of Errol's personality.
He was complicated, let's put it that way.
Even during his marriage to Maye, Elon's mother, he was, how do I put this delicately?
Quite the charmer.
I put it mildly.
And their marriage, talk about a whirlwind. Rushed ceremony, a European honeymoon, and then bam! Maye realizes she's pregnant on, their second night.
You can't make this stuff up.
It's a far cry from a fairy tale romance.
It makes you wonder how much of that early family dynamic, that sense of instability, maybe even a fear of abandonment might have shaped young Elon. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind a bit. Head back to 1971.
Back to Pretoria, South Africa.
The stage is set. We've got this family legacy of risk-takers, trailblazers, and yeah, maybe a few heartbreakers in the mix.
Sex in the scene. Right.
And into this whirlwind walks, or should I say cries, little Elon.
Not the easiest baby, by all accounts.
Maye makes it sound like he was high maintenance, to say the least. Big eater, hardly slept.
Hardwired for high energy right from the start.
Makes you wonder if those SpaceX all-nighters are just him reverting to factory settings. But on a serious note, Maye, she seems to recognize early on that Elon is different. She even calls him a genius baby, tries to get him into nursery school early.
Which any parent can tell you doesn't always go according to plan.
Understatement of the year.
Turns out even a mini Elon Musk wasn't immune to the social challenges of being the youngest in class.
Well, yeah, imagine being that brain in that environment.
And it's around this time, too, that Isaacson hints at Maye starting to realize that her son, well, he might not fit neatly into any box. And that's okay.
It's like that saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Yeah.
Exactly. Even back then, it seems Elon had his own way of processing the world, often got lost in his own thoughts.
Which, I mean, anyone who's ever tried to get his attention on Twitter can probably relate to.
Right. But there's this one anecdote about Elon just totally oblivious to a teacher yelling at him, like lost in his own world, completely tuned out.
Okay, see, now I can't even ignore someone trying to get my attention in a meeting, let alone a whole classroom. But I guess it speaks to that ability to focus, right? To block out distractions that we see in Elon now, that almost superhuman drive to achieve his goals.
It's a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? That same intensity can lead to burnout, clashes with others. It's like the very things that make him so successful also contain the seeds of his struggles.
It's that classic Shakespearean hero's dilemma. The fault, dear listener, is not in our stars, but in ourselves.
And in the very specific circumstances of our upbringing, right? Those early influences, they shape us, even if we spend the rest of our lives trying to outrun them. Which brings us back to our original question, doesn't it? What can we learn from digging into Elon Musk's early years? What's the takeaway?
For me, it's a reminder that there's no single answer, no easy explanation for what makes someone who they are. It's genetics, upbringing, experiences, all of it woven together.
Absolutely. And we may not all have the drive to colonize Mars or, revolutionize the auto industry, but understanding those forces that shape someone like Elon Musk, it gives us a new perspective, don't you think, on our own journeys?
100%. And on that note, I think it's time for us to take a page from Elon's book. Maybe not the sleeping on the factory floor part, but definitely the thinking big part.
Always a good plan.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. If you're anything like me, you're probably ready to grab another biography, brush up on your knowledge of Canadian politics. Who knew, right? But as always, the real discovery is in the connections we make. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration. And remember, every life, when you really dig deep, is a story waiting to be unpacked.